Hello, everyone. Today is Thursday, November 5th. As always, I'm your host for Collectibles and Coffee, Edward Nguyen. Beverage of choice today, water, like usual. Today, we do have the full spoiler for Commander Legends up, so I figure this is probably as good of a time as any to start reviewing the set, look at prices, look at what's being reprinted, what the price trends are, kind of do a breakdown of the set, and try and figure out where we can put our money, where we can be spending our money most effectively with this set. So let's jump right in. Commander Legends, this has been kind of the buzz for the past few weeks. There's been a lot of hype about it. We touched on it very briefly earlier this week when cards were first being spoiled. So today we do have the full spoiler for the set. You can go look at the full spoiler on the Mothership, the main website. You can see all the cards that are available to have an idea of what's out there, what you're looking at. At the time of this writing, I looked up prices a little bit ago, just before the episode, as I was writing up the outline. I noticed that boxes are kind of becoming relatively stable. Most places do have box prices up, and there's a fair amount of them. So at the time of writing, we're looking at box prices of about $130, give or take, and then collector boxes are about $270. I think these prices are probably going to be roughly where they settle at, maybe a little bit less, but I think there's going to be a lot of demand for a set. There does seem to be a lot of hype. This is usually indicative of what prices should look like when a new set is coming out, and this is the first time they've done anything like this. So they really, in my opinion, looking through a spoiler, looking at the cards that have been spoiled, they've really done a good job of putting that wow factor into the set. A lot of things that they have introduced, a lot of the new cards they've been printed, that are new introductions to Commander, really do hit that profile of this is definitely going to change the face of Commander. These are definitely going to be a lot of new inclusions, new unique, big splashy abilities that is very iconic of Commander. And I think that this is going to be a product that is going to sell very well. I think collector boosters are kind of in an interesting spot. We know, I mentioned a few times before what my opinion on them has been. I think that the nature of collector boosters is, for this particular set, is a little paradoxical. I've not been big on collector booster cards in the past, because the nature of making a lot of premium type cards when you have every card with the possibility of being an extended art, rare, what have you, all these cards are usually, in the case of a traditional set, thinking to Ikoria, Zendikar Rising, Core 21, all these different editions, one, it definitely depresses the price on the normal cards in the set, and two, with so many premium products going around, trying to bounce around between the cards in the set, the collector, the extended art, full art versions, etc. It does seem like, in my mind, it does get a little bit cluttered, but the biggest difference with collector boosters in Commander Legends is that there is certainly a much bigger draw. There is much more appeal to the consumer who would be purchasing Commander Legends. They would have more interest in buying foil premium cards. So foils are always popular among Commander players, and now when we kind of throw extended art onto the mix, you definitely give players a lot more options when it comes to choosing their cards, and Commander players are generally the people who have the most interest in that level of customization. Whereas, in my mind, a set like Ikoria, Core 21, Zendikar Rising, the draw for standard players is much, much lower. For most of those people, they really only want to be spending their money trying to buy just the draft booster basic variant on your rares, mythics, what have you, for their deck. They don't really care about making it look popular, especially any standard deck you buy right now may no longer be viable when the next set comes out. So there's not a lot of sense in trying to pay for premium on those cards in standard booster packs. Whereas Commander Legends, a lot of these people, some of the more premium versions, a lot of cards that have unique effects, it does make sense to shell out the extra money because there's no rotation to Commander. It's not like you're going to just dismantle your Commander deck one day and and get rid of it and build a new one. There are people who do that, but that's much less common. For most people, their Commander deck is kind of their pride and joy. It's a work in progress. They're constantly looking for what foil can I buy to upgrade. I'll swap out, if I get a new foil, I'll swap out the old one. Maybe I'm swapping out one card for another card. Maybe this card doesn't play as well as I want, so I'm just going to remove kind of this subset, the small theme inside the deck, replace it with other cards, see how that goes. All these things give the extended art cards, the premium cards, a lot more draw. So I think the price on collector booster boxes is probably much more accurate, and they're much more likely to hold their value, at least for their near future. I do see singles will start to slowly tank in price, and you have this chain reaction that occurs when people open up collector boosters in mass for whatever premium version there is. The premium versions get sold off, and when they do, it causes the price on the normal versions of the cards to go down. So now that we have so many people opening up collector boosters, it causes a depression on the prices of the normal cards, because now when you have these premium versions, these full art variants trying to press up against that price, it causes the rest of the cards to go down. And then in turn, when people start seeing those cards going down, people shift their attention away, from the higher end cards, because now there's a larger disparity, there's a larger gap between the premium versions and the normal versions. So people start buying those. It lowers the value, it lowers the EV on standard booster boxes. So then at some point we'll start to see maybe the collector booster boxes drop down a little bit, as people have to keep the gap between the standard version and the premium version relatively consistent. That's been a trend that I've noticed across the past few sets with Ikoria, Core, and Zendikar. It feels like that trend has been relatively standard. With Zendikar, we did see that the amount of people opening up the collector boosters for expeditions, for the foil expeditions, was much higher. So it did feel like it caused the market to come down much, much quicker. Zendikar also had kind of the misfortune of creating a pretty unbalanced standard format early on, and I think that did cause the set to suffer a little bit right away. So it remains to be seen what effect these collector boosters will have on the normal set of Commander Legends. Because this is the first time that they have done this, I think that the nature of the set, in my mind, we'll kind of review some of the cards. They do look very good. It does seem like the EV is going to be a little bit higher, depending on what directions the reprints go, depending on how quickly the reprints drop in price. But it does feel like these prices probably in line with what they should be. It wouldn't surprise me if we did see collector booster boxes fall a little bit. It depends on how much demand there is and how much the product is being allocated. If it is being short printed, we know that Commander Legends is already technically delayed. This is a November 20th release. We remember a few months back they had announced that they were pushing back due to production from the original release date of November 6th. So technically this should be releasing tomorrow. Now we're pushing it back 2 weeks until the actual release. So if there is any sort of supply allocation, if there's a pinch in the supply chain somewhere from distributors to stores, the prices may hold a little bit longer, kind of what we saw with Zendikar Rising before the prices start to come down. Zendikar Rising does feel like the prices have come down quite a bit. I think that a lot of people were kind of caught off guard with, there was initially a huge surge in demand for Zendikar Rising. It looked like the set was going to do very good, and then it just really quickly just fell down on people's want to reorder, to have more product in stock, to really be buying it once the ban started to come out and really shift and change the way the standard format played out. it is really unfortunate in my mind that this particular product is coming out right before Black Friday. I think that's really, really going to stretch a lot of people's spending money very, very thin. If there are people who are looking to wait for Black Friday, maybe they may be a little tentative about pulling the trigger on Commander Legends a week before, especially if there is the potential in knowing that maybe if I wait a week, their stores may be having deals. Stores may just put a flat X% off on prices. There may just be a flat X% off sale on everything in the store type things. These are various things that do happen on Black Friday, and putting this release date, the street release date, 1 week before is probably going to cause some level of tension for people who are buying. So that part is a little worrisome. And then, of course, we don't know what the supply looks like. As mentioned before, if we do see any sort of disruption in the supply chain and these become allocated, then all of a sudden we start having kind of a rush for people to go out and try and order whatever they can, because it may not be available until well into December at that point. These are all things to consider when it comes to box prices. So we have that. We're gonna kind of keep that in our minds as we're thinking about prices, as we're thinking about prices of singles, what the supply looks like, because all these will be determining factors on how quickly single prices drop. With that, it is important to note that there's a lot of SKUs in the set. SKUs is short for SKU. SKU is short for store keeping unit. Basically, it's a barcode. It's the barcodes that you see when you're scanning them on items. SKUs just kind of refers to unique items inside the set, collect numbers, what have you. There are 722 SKUs in the set. I looked up, now that we have the full spoiler, the breakdown is the actual set itself. There are 361 cards. There's 6 new cards in the Commander decks. So 1 through 361 collector number is the actual Commander Legends set itself. 362 to 367 are the 6 new Commander deck cards. The cards that are being reprinted inside the Commander decks are 368 to 511. So reprints there inside the new Commander decks. I don't think deck lists have been released for that. That may be coming up in the next upcoming days. So that's about 150-ish, 140-ish reprints. There's 2 cards, the Borderless Planeswalkers. Those are 512 and 513. The foil etch cards, those are the cards with the premium treatment, commander only type cards. Those are from 514 to 545. And then this is the part that really gets me. For extended art cards, they're from 546 to 720. That's about 180 cards that have received the extended art treatment, to be those in that range. The buy box promo, Mana Confluence, that's 721, and the pre-release promo, Baron Sengir or something, is 722. So 722 unique cards being printed in this set. Not all of them available in the same product, obviously. With the Commander Legend boosters, I don't think that you can get the foil etch cards in there. So some of these products will be exclusive. Some of these cards you can only get via Commander deck. So the set itself, 361 cards, that's a pretty big set. Commander booster packs themselves have 20 cards in them. There's 24 packs inside one box. So it feels like trying to get each individual card is going to be a little bit harder. There's 22 mythics in this set versus the normal standard set, Zendikar Rising, Core 2021, what have you, that have 15 mythics. So there's 50% more mythics that compared to your standard sets, which in my mind will keep the prices a little bit higher, because as they are more rare, they're hard to come. You have to open up more product. The cost is a little bit higher, so the sell price is a little bit higher. So I don't think that we'll see prices settle quite as fast, simply due to the sheer number of cards inside the set. That being said, that is a lot of cards, and a lot of them are reprints. We do have a fair amount of cards at all levels. There are more expensive reprints. Some of the most noticeable reprints in the set regarding the commanders. Nagila, Queen Marchesa, Timnia, Thrasios. Those are kind of the bigger ones. Those are the full etch commanders. Those are some of the bigger ones. I'm really interested to see what this will do to the foil prices because these are two of these, Nagila and Queen Marchesa. I think there's a few others I missed. I didn't have a chance to go through a spoiler and look at all the prices in full. If you aren't aware, Nagila and Queen Marchesa, they're mythics in their respective sets in Battle Bond and Conspiracy to take the crown. The cards themselves, not particularly valuable. We're looking at $5 to $10. Queen Marchesa was a little bit more expensive prior to the reprints that came in Mystery Booster. So that one kind of knocked it down a little bit. But this is kind of Commander really rearing its head here. The price on the foils on both of these are well over $100. Nagila, I think is right about $100, maybe a little bit less than that, and Queen Marchesa is I think about $130 or so, $125, $130, and those I think is again really indicative of what Commander does to prices. These are the cards that if people play them as their Commander and people want them in foil, there's only one printing of both of these cards in foil. Queen Marchesa non-foil, there is a second printing, but it wasn't a foil in Mystery Boosters, so that price has remained relatively high. It is interesting to see what a foil etch version will do to those prices. As I mentioned in my past videos, I think that your original set foils are going to be relatively safe in price. I think that Queen Marchesa, because it is a kind of a narrow legacy foil as well, but it does see play in legacy lands, I believe. I think it has the price won't be too heavily impacted because there will always be people who are in the I want the OG foil, I want the OG printing crowd. Those people tend to keep those prices relatively high. But now there is a second alternative for some of these cards. Timnia and Thrasios, those were foils from Commander Precon decks in the past few years. I want to say they're probably in the 2014-15 era. So 5 years ago, getting pretty hard to come by on these cards. A lot of these cards did see kind of a big price increase earlier this year, as we've seen most Commander cards just trickle upwards in price. And I think these two are kind of welcome additions. It's a little silly in my mind that Commander should be as expensive as they are. I think Thrasios, Timmy are probably in like the $30, $35 range. So having another option would be a little bit welcome. It is a little bit surprising that those two particular ones don't exist in non-foil yet. I think that is something that I think would have been nice for Wizards to do. A lot of the cards that they did opt to put into the foil etch Commander set of cards that they chose, a lot of them are cards that came from the Commander Precon decks. A lot of them don't have non-foil versions. I know that there are people out there who don't care for foils, and I think it would have been nice if some of these cards did have non-foil versions for those people who do prefer the non-foil treatment. So those were kind of the bigger ones that I noticed in the Commanders. There are a few other ones. Some of them are a little bit more obscure. It's possible they may be valuable. I'm just not fully aware on the price. So regarding the foil Commanders, those are there. Those are something to consider. If you are sitting on original foil Gila, foil Marchesa, one of the things I mentioned in past videos when we kind of discussing these premium cards, the value is unlikely to take a huge hit. They're original, they're kind of hard to come by. Conspiracy boxes, pretty old at this point, right? Pretty hard to come by. So I think those are going to be relatively safe. I don't think that your foils will necessarily take in value, but it will become hard to sell. And I think that is something that is of real concern when it becomes harder to sell these, when they become less liquid. It does become a little bit of a deterrent, especially because people simply have more choices now. When there are more choices, then each individual version, their liquidity takes a hit. Just something to consider if you ever are in a position where you are thinking about, hey, maybe I do have to sell off my Commander deck. That's something that you're going to have to consider, especially because if these foil etch versions are substantially cheaper, what if we're in a position where if we have a foil etch Queen Marchesa, for example, if we're looking at the TCG price on the conspiracy pack, right, 125, 130, what happens if the foil etch version is $50? That seems like it's a cheap price. We don't know if that's the case. To me, $50 may be a little bit too cheap, but in the event that it is that cheap, simply due to sheer number of collector boosters that are going to be opened by people, if they are that cheap, it may be very, very difficult to sell your foil Queen Marchesa for that $125 to $130 range if people have an option that's more than half off. I could be wrong. It's possible that these prices may be higher than that. It's possible if your full etch version of Queen Marchesa is $100 or $150, then there's no real harm. There's going to be no real issue when it comes to trying to sell off your cards. But you always have to think about liquidity becomes more difficult. People have two choices to choose from. Maybe the foil etch versions are cool enough. Maybe some people might think that for $130, if I have to spend that price, maybe I'll just spend extra $20 to get the foil etch version instead. That also kind of depends on how your average Commander player handles this product. I know there's a fair amount of people who generally, I do see quite a few people who buy this product. They buy a box of collector boosters, $270. They go through it, and they'll probably keep the reprints or the few Commander cards that they want, that are looking for themselves. And then what they'll do is they'll actually sell off the bulk of what they don't need. Some of these other, maybe they opened up, a foil Queen Marchesa, for example, and they don't need it. They just simply don't have an EDH deck for it. It doesn't really fit into their collection in terms of what they want to do. They would be selling these off to try and offset the costs to knock down that $270 for the box and knock the price down so they can be spending as little money on the cards that they're keeping for themselves as possible. That is something that I do expect to see when it comes to collector boosters, kind of these high-end cards. But it is important to know there are a fair amount of commanders that look at it a completely different way. They may look at it as, I've opened up a full Queen Marchesa, even though I don't have a home for her right now, even though I don't have a deck that uses her, I'm just going to build a new EDH deck. And part of that is why I think EDH decks are so successful, why they're really the bread and butter for most retail stores, is now that this customer has basically got a new product, they have opened up cards that they didn't have before. It doesn't really have a spot that fits into their collection, but now they have a reason to purchase more cards. Now they have a reason to go out and purchase cards that fit into their Queen Marchesa deck. And that basically opens up a whole new avenue for being able to buy and sell cards with this customer. Just something to keep in mind regarding those cards. There are a few other cards that fall into that boat, but Najeela and Queen Marchesa really kind of stand out ones. Tymnia and Thrasios, kind of the ones that really have seen huge price increases where this reprint is relatively welcome. Some of the notable reprints in terms of really big dollar cards that really kind of sell the set in terms of their price, in terms of making them accessible again. We have Mandrain, Vampire Tutor, Scroll Rack, Rings of Bright Hearth, and Staff of Domination. Those are kind of the big ones. Most of these have seen a pretty substantial price increase within the past few months. Most of these real staple cards and commanders, they're kind of very, very powerful for effect. Some of them have relatively unique effects. Rings of Bright Hearth, very good in like a Planeswalker deck, for example. Staff of Domination, lots of degenerate things you can do, especially with infinite mana. This card basically becomes a win condition at that point. Granted, if you have infinite mana, there's plenty of ways that you can easily generate a win in Commander. This just happens to be one of the more efficient ways to do so. Vampire Tutor, just kind of a very, very good, powerful tutor effect that just is a good catch-all. That's very, very popular in Commander. Mandrain has been basically just steadily increasing with Iconic Masters. That was the last printing of it. That's been a few years since we've seen Mandrain out in the wild. So this is, again, another kind of welcome addition to that. Scroll Rack, Artifact, just a very generic, powerful artifact that a lot of people do like, and it does slot fairly well into basically every Commander deck. since of these cards are being reprinted, it is important to note that when we kind of tie this back to the Najeela and Queen Marchesa argument, most of these cards do have premium versions that exist already. So Mandrain, we have the original versions from Legends. We have the iconic Masters version, which in my mind is kind of going to be the same as the Commander Legends variant. They use the same art. There's going to be the normal card and then the pack foil variant on it. So in my mind, those are the same. But Mandrain also does have a Judge version. So Mandrain, few options when it comes to which version do you like there. I do suspect that the Judge version will take a hit as a result. The Judge version, fairly hard to come by, not the easiest card to come by. I think at the time, I'm going to pull it up real quick just to make sure that I see this right. It's been a few years since we've seen the Judge promo come out and be available to people. The art is a little bit unique as well, so that will likely be a draw to people as well. My internet's slow, so I'm going to come back and visit in a second. Vampiric Tutor, we covered that in a previous video. There's 2 Judge printings. There is your original printings with the old school art, and then now we have a bunch of extended art versions just kind of thrown in on top of that as well. It does use the same art as the EMA version, so no real change on that one. Scroll Rack, Rings of Bright Hearth, and Staff of Domination, these are actually all Kaladesh masterpieces as well. So that is something to consider if you're trying to get in. The original foils, again, relatively stable in price. Masterpieces, relatively stable in price. I think the look on them is just so unique, so different versus kind of the extended art. It feels a little bit lackluster because you have the same art. It's just a bigger border. So to me, those have always been a little bit silly. I never cared for the extended art look. So I think that even though we do see extended art versions on all these cards, Mandarin, Vampiric Tutor, Orac, Rings of Bright Hearth, Staff of Domination, it's going to be a little bit tougher to sell them in my mind just because there will be so many versions that exist out there. But these versions, it's simply another premium version. Your liquidity is going to take a hit. I think that is something to consider when it comes to selling your cards. Most of these, I think the nature of them, unlike your Legends, unlike your Najeelas, unlike your Queen Marchesas, where they really kind of function as a legendary creature, if in theory you don't really need you don't need a Queen Marchesa for every deck. Maybe you have one Queen Marchesa deck and then you have a Queen Marchesa deck that is where she's not the commander, where she kind of fits into other slots inside your deck. Your average player, they aren't going to need a ton of copies of these. Same with Najeela. She's likely going to be a commander only type card, not really going to fit in as a normal part of your 99. Whereas these cards, I think there's a little bit more appeal. Mandrain is the type of card where you probably want to slot it in most, if not all, your blue decks. Scroll Rack, Rings of Bright Hearth, Staff of Domination. Scroll Rack is probably the most evergreen card. That one kind of really goes into all decks. Rings of Bright Hearth, Staff of Domination, if you have ways to take advantage of activated abilities or you have ways to really get maximum value from Staff of Domination, then it has more of a place. That card is a little bit more play. Vampiric Tutor, definitely a card that if you have a black deck, don't really see a reason to not play Vampiric Tutor unless your group is not really okay with tutors being part of the meta. So these cards, I think there's more reason to buy them, and I think they do kind of fall in a different range than the Legends do. So the reprints, I think, depending on how quickly the prices drop, I remember I looked earlier, I think Rings of Bright Hearth, Staff of Domination, they probably take the biggest hit, simply because those cards were expensive, largely due to scarcity. Rings of Bright Hearth, I know I looked on Card Kingdom, they were pre-selling this card at $10, $9.99, which seems insanely low to me, considering how Rings of Bright Hearth prior to this reprint was pushing $45 or so. So, very different animals there. I think, again, these reprints, they really do help sell the set. I don't see the prices dropping that dramatically, and if they do, as mentioned, because these cards really do fit into multiple decks, it's very easy to see someone out there might end up buying 4 or 5 Vampiric Tutors because they have 4 or 5 black commander decks. This is a very viable situation. I think these cards will be able to rebound in price relatively quickly, as we have kind of seen in the past. So they are reprints. They will help sell the set. The premium versions, a little iffy on. All know how I feel about those. So that is something I would be aware of. I finally got my page load for the Mandrain. For the Judge promo Mandrain, we're looking at about $250-ish, $270-ish for those versions. So versus a Iconic Masters Mandrain, if I pull up the foil, we're looking about $200 for the foil. So may take a little bit of a hit on now that we have the introduction of more premium versions, but that'll kind of remain to be seen. And one last thing I want to touch about today is that for some of you who do use TCG Player, you may have gotten email earlier this morning. It is important to note that they are doing a TCG kickback tomorrow. If you're not familiar with this, a TCG kickback means that when you buy cards, if you spend $10 and it's a 10% kickback, for example, you'll get $1 back in TCG Player store credit that you can use down the line. So in essence, you're not really saving 10%. A kickback, again, means that you're basically going to use that money again in the future. So if you're going to spend the money again anyways, then you could look at it as, sure, I'm saving 10%. So it is something to consider. I think that if you're looking to pull the trigger on boxes, collector boosters, maybe you want to pre-order some singles, it is worth considering that tomorrow is probably as good a time as any to get in and buy from TCG Player. I know that a lot of TCG Player sellers, they do kind of look forward to these kickback sales because it really does help kind of cause a surge in online sales, which is where we want to be right now. October has been a slow retail month for a lot of people in the past. Zendikar Rising being underwhelming didn't really help that. So TCG Player doing this is going to be a nice boon for sales tomorrow. That is something to consider. So if you're looking to pull a trigger, I would do so sooner rather than later. One of the most important things that does happen when these kickback sales occur is that a lot of the cheap versions of cards, so if people are thinking, do I want to pull the trigger on some Zendikar Rising Expeditions, for example, if you're going to be hesitant about pulling the trigger, you are going to have to remember that when people see this kickback, when people see this 10% off sale, they're going to be pulling the trigger, and a lot of cheap versions of cards tend to disappear, and as more cheap cards disappear, prices start to climb. So if this is something that you want to pull the trigger on, I would pull the trigger on it relatively early. With boxes, some of the cheaper sellers may not have a large amount of them in stock. So if you're looking to try and snag 1 or 2 cheap boxes just so you can have Commander Legends ready and available to you, do so early. And this is not, I'm not trying to push this because it benefits me. I know I'll get sales regardless, but as a consumer, if you're out there, if you're kind of on the fence about pulling trigger on buying any singles that you've been waiting to get cheaper, this is probably the time to do so. Do so early. The longer you wait, the more likely someone will be buying up the cheap copies that you're thinking about, and your price will go up. It is interesting that they are doing a kickback tomorrow, so especially so close. Usually in the past few years, usually the biggest one we see is kind of on Black Friday. That's usually when we see the biggest sale. So it's interesting that they would do one now because, as mentioned, a lot of people's dollars are going to be stretched pretty thin. Their budget, being able to buy these products, are going to be pretty thin. So trying to have the sale now, and then potentially with Commander Legends coming out in 2 weeks from tomorrow, and then 1 week later is Black Friday, I think that's going to cause a lot of tension for some people. So I'm not really sure. Can't really recommend what the best time to be going out and buying is. It is likely that TCG Player will have another sale on Black Friday. That's something that they've done. That they've done pretty consistently over the past few years. But things could change. We're in pretty different times than we have been. Don't hold me to it. It's very possible that they don't do a kickback sale this year. So take all that in consideration when you're buying. If you're looking at things that aren't necessarily related to Commander Legends, like Zendikar Rising Expeditions, for example, tomorrow probably going to be the best time to just get in there once the sale goes live and start buying right away, because the longer you wait, as mentioned, you're more likely to get punished when people do pick up cheap copies. It's likely that I'll be spending some amount of money in the morning just trying to get things that I think will go up in the short term. Things are underpriced. I think things are probably the best buys tomorrow, if you're looking to spend some money, are Zendikar Rising Expeditions. They're kind of at the low. We're starting to bump up against that point that Zendikar Rising no longer the most recent card pack, no longer the newest thing. So once it kind of shifts away from that, once Commander Legends becomes a new thing, and then after that we have Commander Collection Green becoming the new thing, Zendikar Rising is going to start falling off the radar, so I don't really see cards getting much cheaper than they are now. So Expeditions, probably a good time to buy tomorrow. I'm pretty keen on buying up Double Masters cards. I think we're well past the point of people kind of having Double Masters at the forefront of their mind. So getting some of the cheap reprints, I think this is probably tomorrow will be as good a time as ever. I know that if you're looking to buy some higher end things, TCG Player getting 10% back is very reasonable, especially on some more of the more expensive Pokemon cards. It'll be kind of interesting to watch the market and see how Pokemon kind of adapts. I think this is really the first time that we've seen a 10% off in kind of this boom cycle for Pokemon. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see if people do use the opportunity to really kind of snag up cards that they've been waiting and benefiting from that 10% credit. So these are all these things to consider before tomorrow. I feel like it was worth noting. I'm going to definitely say this again on my channel tomorrow, on my videos, for people who may have missed it. I think that, again, if you're looking to spend some money, waiting for these kickbacks is probably as good a time as ever. From what I remember, there was one year when TCG Player did a 15% kickback. That's something that I think they only did one year. I would be surprised if they did 15% again, because 15% basically erases any margin that they're making when it comes to seller fees. Most seller fees, it's about 11% plus the PayPal processing. That puts it roughly about 14 to 15%, give or take, depending on how it adds up, because there's a small flat fee in there that kind of throws off the math on everything. So smaller orders, it becomes a larger percentage overall. When you have a big order, then the fees become a little bit more negligible and more accurate to what that percentage is. So 15% kind of erases all margin they make. So it depends on the direction that TCG Players want to take. So maybe they can afford to be a little bit more conservative. For the people who've done this for a while, you may remember that there was a period when TCG Player, it did feel like they were doing some sort of kickback sale regularly. Like it almost felt like it was once a month or so. Feels like they have moved away a little bit from that to make them not quite as often. So seeing this 10%, I think, is going to be a little bit welcome. Again, Black Friday, it's possible it may be more. It is 15% one year. It's been 10% the other years. So I think 10% probably is going to be as good as we're going to get. I don't really foresee TCG Player giving much more than 10%. It doesn't seem like it's in their best interest to do so. So that's just kind of the last topic on the kickback. I don't think the pre-ordering Commander Legends is the way to go. I'd rather wait until November 20th, kind of see where prices settle. Jewel Lotus, one thing that we didn't really talk about, I didn't really want to get into it too much, but that card has gone down a little bit. It's pre-ordering lower than it has in the past few days. I think people are starting to realize that this card, while powerful, while very broken, it's not going to be, that price isn't really sustainable. You can't have a $120 box that could potentially open up a $200 mythic. That is not really something that's sustainable in terms of price. So it makes sense that it's gone down. I would generally hold off, just as a last thought, I would generally hold off on pre-ordering Commander Legends. With tomorrow's kickback, I think you're going to save more money by waiting for prices to drop. I feel like prices will generally drop more than 10% across the board as stores start opening these up and starting putting their singles up for pre-sale on their website. So tomorrow, I would not really worry about Commander Legends. Maybe you benefit from buying boxes or collector booster boxes if that's the avenue you want to go. Save the 10% there. But if you're looking for singles, look to buy other things and then maybe turn to Black Friday once prices have kind of settled to benefit from the kickback then. With that, that'll wrap up today's episode. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Edwin13. You can find the social media sites for Vermilion on the right. Wherever you are in the world, stay safe. As always, thank you for listening. I appreciate the people out there who listen, who leave feedback. More than happy to engage in conversation, respond to comments. I know there's people out there who've definitely given me ideas for future episodes, so I thank everyone for that. If you do leave feedback, more than happy to engage, more than happy to chat with people. As always, thank you for listening. We'll be back tomorrow with more. Thanks again.